Before we start, I need you to do something with me. I need full participation. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine the floor beneath you disappears. It just drops away and you're falling. Now I want you to think, who is standing there to catch you? Open your eyes. For many people in the world, no one is standing there. My name is Jay. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself so you fully understand how I came to be. I was born in a farm. I was born and raised in a small farm in Zimbabwe. I remember wide skies, open spaces. In that farm, that childhood, it taught responsibility before theory. And growing up in a farm, it definitely teaches work ethic before ambition. That is me before I became handsome. There was an interesting point in my life when my parents wanted me to be a doctor. But my grades, my grades said otherwise. But even then, I remember thinking, I lived in a different reality compared to the children I played football with in the same dusty streets. I lived a reality where I had access to education, opportunity, and choices. They lived a reality where their floor had already fallen out and no one was standing there to catch them. I didn't have the words for it then, but I was already thinking like an architect. I was already seeing systems instead of circumstances. I realized that I was privileged. The floor fell out for me when I moved to the UK as an asylum seeker. I went from open spaces, like I said, open land and long horizons, to being labeled a case, to being labeled stateless, a problem to be dealt with. I remember the first week in my estate. I stood in the corridors, in the staircase, and I realized you could hear everything that's happening in this building. It felt like people were living on top of one another, lives stacked. At that moment, I really felt compressed, I felt reduced. They say crisis sharpens you. And when you're drowning, you feel every current. I had no friends, so I retreated to the local library. That space there, that was my refuge, my safe space. I took advantage of the free internet and I read constantly. Because in that library, I was not stateless. I was not a problem. I felt unlimited. I decided I will create my own second chance. I will build my ladder one book at a time. Fast forward a few years, I'll tell you this story, quite interesting. Fast forward a few years, in my final year of university, actually, I attended an event, and the keynote speaker for that event was none other than Martin Luther King III. He's the eldest son of the American civil rights activist, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He spoke about his father's legacy. He spoke about his hope for the African American community going forward. That speech was very inspiring. And naturally, I had questions. So at the end of the event, we all had an opportunity to take photos with him. I decided I'll seize the moment. This is it. I went over. I introduced myself. I said, "Sir, my name is Jay. I'm from Zimbabwe. That's in Africa, by the way. I'm so inspired by your speech. But I have one question." He looked at me and said, "Go ahead, son." I said, "How does it feel to walk in the footsteps of a giant? How does it feel to have that on your shoulders?" He paused a little. I kid you not, he looked me dead in the eye. And I thought, okay, he's about to answer the question. But instead, he answered with a question of his own. He said, "What are your hopes for the people of Africa?" My mind is like, no, 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 no. This is not how it was supposed to go. I asked the question, you answer. I'm not going to say how I responded to that question. It was quite embarrassing. I'm not willing to go through that again. I said something safe, something forgettable. We took this awkward picture, and I was ushered away. That evening on the way home, I was reflecting on our conversation, on how I could have answered that question better. But it dawned on me that all my heroes, from Malcolm X to Nelson Mandela, all my heroes shared a particular kind of hope. It was not the comfortable kind, no. It was the costly kind. It was the kind of hope that demanded action. Somewhere between King's Cross and Luton Parkway, I made a decision. I said, I will stop admiring hope and I'll start engineering it. Me being me, I didn't act on that decision immediately, no surprise. I procrastinated for a few years. But life has a way of filling that gap between conviction and confidence, basically. I knew what I wanted to do, I just wasn't confident enough. Eventually, in 2016, I set up the LeNoir Foundation. It is a charity I set up to bridge the digital divide in communities similar to where I was from and the one I now call home, Luton. At that point, I'd spent at least a few years solving complex problems in the corporate world as a project manager. And I thought, why can't I bring the same skills, the same resources, and add value to my community? Normally, when I mention the digital divide, a lot of people imagine it as a problem somewhere in the global south, somewhere in a developing nation. I hate to be the one to break it to you. That gap exists right here. 22%, according to a study completed in 2021, 22% of our population here were effectively left behind when the world moved online during COVID. That is 1 in 5 of us. Imagine a primary school student in year 5 in a local primary school. If they lack access to digital equipment, digital literacy, they're not just left behind. They're literally invisible to the economy of tomorrow. With that in mind, armed with this data, we set up a 6-week coding club for 18 students. We didn't just bring them another boring IT class, no, no, no. We decided we'll bring them an adventure. We taught them HTML, JavaScript, but not just boring lines of text. We used Scratch, a visual programming language that allows them to create stories, games, and animation. They were literally building their own world while learning basic code. I recall watching a girl who was initially hesitant to even use the program, to her writing her first lines of code. I had to pause for a moment because that moment there, that was a second chance taking effect. She was initially no longer a passenger in someone else's world. She was becoming the pilot. Many of us in this room are sitting on untapped potential. We've figured out the hardest problem in life, how to have a life, create a life that works. But we want more. One more pay rise, one more promotion, just one more layer of comfort. But what I've learned through this work is that the most fulfilled people are not the ones who build the tallest towers. It is the ones who build the longest bridges. Remember that question I asked you in the beginning? I said, imagine the floor's fall is disappearing and who's standing there to catch you? But when you leave here today, I'd like you to leave not as someone wondering who's going to catch you, but as someone willing to be the floor. To be the floor for the 22% of people that are digitally excluded here in our community. Because when we build these systems, these ladders of literacy, these coding clubs, it's not just an act of charity. No. It means the future doesn't have to wonder who will catch them. They will be standing on a foundation we built together. When we build a way out for someone else, we often find our own exit too. That farm in Zimbabwe, it taught me how to plant seeds. The library, it taught me how to read blueprints. I believe you already know how to build. You already know how to plant. My only question is, will you? Thank you.